Welcome back, Sebastian here. So today I'm going to be doing my predictions for the 2024 Formula One season. Of course, as of the recording of this video, it's just after winter testing and just before the Bahrain Grand Prix. So I am basing a lot of these predictions based on what we saw this past week at the Bahrain test. But of course, you know, the pecking order can change throughout the season, and that's definitely something that I had to keep in mind when making these predictions. So starting right away with number 20, I'm going to go with Kevin Magnussen. So while Haas, I think, had a good test, I do feel like there was still, I still feel like, and the data suggests as well, that they were still one of the slower cars in both quality trim and race trim. And while we know race pace and tire management has been a massive issue for Haas the last several years, and while it looks like it's improved, I still don't think it's at a level where they'll really be able to mix it up a whole lot with many of the cars ahead of them. And I think points are going to be a real luxury this year. So it could be a real lottery, those final positions in both the Drivers' Championship and the Constructors' Championship. Number 19, I'm going to put his teammate Nico Hulkenberg. A lot of the same reasons I mentioned with Magnussen. I do feel like at this point in time, Hulkenberg is probably definitely at least the better qualifier last year, unless something massively changes there, which I don't really expect. I would expect that to stay the same. They're about equal in race pace, but that disparity in starting grid position that we saw last year, I expect that to carry over to this year. So that's why I have Hulkenberg ahead of Magnussen. Now, number 18, I'm going to put Logan Sargent. So for Sargent, I hope that he improves this year. He should improve. It would be quite strange if he didn't improve, and that would be a sign that he's probably not going to get renewed for a third season. But for Williams, I think they didn't have the best test. I think there are some who were hoping that they would kind of push up into, be pushing Alpine for sixth in the constructors, while they may be fighting Alpine. It won't be because of Williams' successes. I think. For Williams, I think they made a lot of changes over the winter with how they developed the car, and I think James Vowles admitted this. And I do think that they're basically going with a brand new car, and those changes are things that had to be made given how many of the processes at Williams were so antiquated. But I feel like at least while they're starting with the new car, I do feel like they'll be able to push and they have a bit more room for growth this year. Of course, for Sargent, still massive gap pace-wise to Albon, so as well as many of the other drivers if they were his teammate. So I've decided to keep him in 18th. Number 17, I have Zhou Guanyu. So for Zhou, I feel like the Alfa Romeo, or not the Alfa Romeo, the Sauber. It's not Alfa Romeo anymore. Sauber. I think they had a decent test. I think. They've had decent tests the last couple of years, and they've started out the season decently. At Bahrain, I guess it's a track that they works well with the car. But we've seen as the season's gone along, both in 2022 and in 2023, they really have struggled to kind of keep up in the development race. And they generally tend to fall behind after those first couple of races. So while they looked okay at this point, I do have some questions about how they're going to be able to maintain that form throughout the season. I do think that they're going to be in a pretty tough fight and probably battling towards the bottom of the constructors. So I put Zhou in 17th. Number 16, I put his teammate. So basically, exact same reasons I mentioned with Zhou, but I do feel Bottas is the better driver at this point. And while it was very close in the races, a bit similar to Hulkenberg and Magnussen, I think Bottas is the better qualifier, and that will give him a good advantage when it comes to any of those lucky chances to get points. Number 15. I've gone with Alex Albon. Yes, Albon. Okay. So for Albon, I do think, yes, like I said, I think the Williams, is going to be in a bit of rough shape this year. I think that being said, I do think Albon will try to get the most out of it. I think the way that the team is wording it is that it's going to be more of an all-rounder type car. It won't be as slick in a straight line, which means that it may not have certain tracks where it's legitimately in Q3 on pace and has a really good shot of points, which was something that Albon did capitalize on a lot last year. It might be a bit more of a struggle this year, but I think that being said, I think Albon's one of the better drivers in those bottom group of teams that we expect for this year. So I think for him, I think 15th is a good spot for him in the championship. Now, number 14, I've decided to go with Esteban Ocon. So Alpine had not a great test, and that's on the back of last year where things didn't go that well. And I've been watching Drive to Survive, and Gasly even says, spoiler alert, I need more power. And I think that's definitely going to continue to be a problem this year for Alpine. The test didn't go that well. People looking at the data with access to better data than I do seem to have come to the conclusion that Alpine are going to be near the bottom of the charts. Hard to believe, especially for a works team, but even if they're towards the bottom at the start, I do think that they should have the resources, and I do think they have the driver lineup to be able to push upwards and kind of not be at the absolute bottom. So that's why I put Ocon in 14th. In 13th, I've gone with his teammate Pierre Gasly. The two of them are very, very close on pace. Gasly did beat Ocon in the Drivers' Championship last year in his first year in the team. This year being his second year, I expect him to be more embedded than he was last year, so I kind of expect Gasly to again be ahead on points. So yeah, Alpine 13th and 14th, definitely a bit of a fall from last year and one that the team will not be happy with. Number 12, I've gone with Yuki Tsunoda. So Racing Bulls look like they've made a good step up with this year's car. Of course, test at a track that's not the most well representative of general F1 tracks at Bahrain. So of course, it could be a bit of a red herring. But that being said, they do look like they have a much better platform to work with than last year. And they were a team that actually brought upgrades through the year. So if they can do that again this year, that would be really good for the team. Of course, the one question mark is that given that they're using so many Red Bull parts, there will be questions kind of like with Haas, who use so many Ferrari parts, if that's going to hurt them with bringing upgrades, if it means that the car they bring at the start of the year is going to be the best car and it's going to just kind of gradually fall through the order. So that is a possibility. But for now, they look very good, and I think based on the data that we have, I think they look like they may be competitive for points. So I put Tsunoda in 12th. I expect another kind of solid improvement, but his benchmark this year is Daniel Ricciardo, who should be very, very hungry to have a very strong kind of proper bounce back season, return season to F1 this year. All right, number 11, I put Lance Stroll. So for Stroll, I think in Aston Martin in general, I think they were happy with their test, but definitely not as happy as last year. And I do think compared to last year, they're a bit on the back foot. And while they haven't come out with a car that's exceptional like they did last year, right out of the box, I do think they have a stable platform to work with. But again, in the pecking order, I do think it's a bit further down. And for Stroll, that of course means that it'll be harder for him to get points. He's a very inconsistent driver, not a great qualifier, and really relies on race pace, for example, to basically kind of pull him through the field. So for Stroll, 11th place, 1 place lower than he finished last year in the championship. Now, moving into the top 10, in 10th I put Daniel Ricciardo. And I think Ricciardo is good enough that even if the Aston Martin is a little bit better, I think he should be good enough to put himself up into the top 10 in the championship. And, like when when Racing Bulls was AlphaTauri, Gasly was off at his best years there. He was able to get himself up into the top 10 in the championship too. So no reason that Ricciardo can't do the same. But yeah, should be a really exciting year, and I think he'll have a really solid year this year, finishing in 10th. Now, number 9, I'm going to put Fernando Alonso. So probably Alonso would be probably quite disappointed to be 9th in the championship, but I do feel like they're a bit of a step behind McLaren, Mercedes, and Ferrari. And for those reasons, while I do think he's still extremely talented, he's a very hungry driver, I think he may unfortunately kind of be stuck in no man's land this year, kind of behind those front 4 teams, but well ahead of kind of everyone else. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see how that plays out. But for those reasons, I've put Alonso in 9th. Now, moving into the top 8, I'm going to put Oscar Piastri in 8th. So for Piastri, I think McLaren were somewhat happy with their test. They weren't as quick as the Ferrari or the Mercedes, but there was an article that came out today where Andrea Stella said that perhaps the Bahrain track doesn't really suit our car and we may do better at other tracks, and that may be the case. but I think for Piastri, he's still very inexperienced going into his second year in F1. And I think even if they were basically on par with those other teams, I think I would still put him in about 8th place. But that being said, I think that he's going to improve a lot this year, and I'm really looking forward to see what he can do. All right, now number 7. I'm going to put George Russell. Maybe a bit controversial to have him below the other McLaren driver of Lando Norris, who of course hasn't shown up yet. But for Russell, I think it's going to be a tricky year. I think the Mercedes should be much better than it was last year. Of course, they're going to be in a very tight fight with the Ferrari, and obviously with the dynamic of Hamilton going to Ferrari, and of course Sainz not having a seat, I think that dynamic could be very interesting as well. And I may be underselling Russell. I think he had a very good 2022, not so great 2023. So we'll see kind of which one shows up, and if he can iron out some of those mistakes. But for now, I'm putting Russell in 7th. Now, in 6th place, I believe same position as last year. I'm going to put Lando Norris. So for McLaren, I think they may be competitive with the Mercedes and Ferraris at some track, but perhaps not at others. And for those reasons, I think while Norris is still a fantastic driver, I do think that he may be a bit limited by this year's car that we've seen at testing. But of course, McLaren brought a massive upgrade last year, and while I did last year predict that they wouldn't be as bad as they were in testing, I'm not sure how much more room they have to grow, like how much more can they kind of upgrade in season. So put Norris in 6th place. Now, in 5th place, I've put Carlos Sainz. And for Sainz, while this year's Ferrari and the race pace runs look really promising, that definitely should help Sainz, who's just been a very strong driver in the races. Qualifying, if the qualifying struggles of the Ferrari are as bad as they seem to be, in terms of kind of now being the opposite of what it was last year, where very strong and instead of being very strong in qualifying and then weak in the race, it's weak in qualifying and strong in the race. While it may help Sainz to have quite a few good recovery drives, I do wonder if the qualifying limitations may hurt him in the long run in the Drivers' Championship. I do have him behind his teammate, but I do have him ahead of the Mercedes of Russell, as well as both McLarens. So number 4, I'm going to put Sergio Perez. So Red Bull looked very good at the preseason test. But that being said, I do think that they're probably going to be closer to the rest of the field than they were at the start of last year. So if we basically have a repeat of the second half of the 2023 season, I think Perez is going to be in a bit of trouble. Even with how dominant Verstappen was in the second half of last year, only lost, of course, the one race in Singapore. Perez struggled, and if you basically made a championship of basically just the second half of the season, I don't think Perez even finished inside the top 3. So I do think he's going to struggle. I think he's going to be really hoping that the Red Bull is again super dominant to start the year like they were last year. Otherwise, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. Assuming Verstappen wins 75. Actually, no, that's probably a bit too high. Assuming Verstappen wins over half of the Grand Prix this year, I think the bare minimum for Perez would be P2 in the championship. I think otherwise he would be placed. So I do think there's going to be a fair amount of pressure on him, and we'll see if he can meet those expectations. Now, number 3, I'm going to go with Lewis Hamilton. So for Hamilton, finished 3rd in the championship last year. I'm again predicting 3rd this year. The Mercedes look like it's in a much better place than it was at this point 12 months ago, and I think they're going to be much more competitive in the early races, kind of similar to how they were in 2023. That being said, I do think that they're a bit of a step behind the Ferrari, and I do wonder if there's going to be any tension within the Mercedes team, as Hamilton will be leaving at the end of the year. Sometimes with these driver exits, when it's this early, sometimes it's not a problem, sometimes it can be pretty bad. When Vettel left Ferrari before 2020, that season was pretty much an absolute disaster for Vettel. You could tell mentally he was just really out of it. Even Alonso at the end of 2022, he really had enough of Alpine, and he was so excited to get to Aston. On the other hand, drivers like Sainz with McLaren in 2020, I don't remember really there being any kind of animosity there. And he, of course, had a pretty good a great season that year in 2020 before going to Ferrari. So we'll see what happens with Hamilton. Of course, he's used to kind of being the main guy, having a lot of team support around him. So we'll kind of see how that dynamic works out between the team and himself. But still, I'm predicting him to finish third place. Now, number 2 in the championship, I'm going to predict Charles Leclerc. I think for Leclerc, this year's Ferrari is going to be exactly the car that he needs to excel. I think he's going to be winning races this year. I think he'll win more than one race this year. I think a Ferrari that is strong on its tires, that's good on race pace, even if it's a bit weak in qualifying, I think is a perfect car for Leclerc. We know how strong he is in qualifying, and any kind of deficiency that the car has in that respect, I think Leclerc's incredible talent over one lap, I think, will more than make up for it. We saw in the first third or so of 2023 that, or not 2023, in the first third of 2022, how strong Leclerc was in some of those races. You know, the great battle between Leclerc and Verstappen at Bahrain and at Saudi Arabia. Hopefully we can have some of that this year, and I think he's going to have a really strong year. Of course, the key for him is to kind of try to iron out those mistakes that he sometimes has, some of the crashes he has as well. So, number 2 in the championship for Leclerc. So of course that means that let's see, can I spell Verstappen right? Yes. Okay, yes, predicted champion for the 2024 F1 season is Max Verstappen. I don't think that's really a surprise. Any other YouTuber who does this, pretty much any pundit who talks about this right now, they're going to be predicting Max Verstappen for the championship. I don't really see any way that he doesn't win. You basically would have to look at some kind of crazy mid-season rule change, tire change. He would basically maybe have to pull a Schumacher 99 type situation would have to happen, perhaps, where he breaks his leg mid-season. But even then, last year he basically could have walked away from the halfway point of the season and still won the championship. So, we'll see how it goes. I think for Verstappen, I think he will probably be looking forward to having some more races, some actual races where he has to compete for the win. We know he doesn't really enjoy just kind of cruising off into the distance and winning by 30 seconds. Of course, he does like those, but I do think he enjoys the tight drives as well. So there are my predictions for the 2024 F1 Drivers' Championship. I guess just to finish off with the Constructors' Championship, I would have Red Bull winning the Constructors. I think Verstappen will have enough of an advantage to kind of make up for whatever loss that Perez has behind it. I think he's ahead of every other team's second driver, so there would be no way that Red Bull could lose in that situation anyway. But yeah, first I'll have Red Bull. Second, I'll go with Ferrari. I think they're going to have a much more improved car. Leclerc being second and Sainz being fifth. Third, I'll go with Mercedes. Fourth will be McLaren. Fifth, Aston. Sixth, Racing Bull. Seventh, Alpine. And then let's see, we have I guess perhaps I'll go with Sauber in 8th, Williams in 9th, and then Haas in 10th. So there you go, my drivers and constructors predictions. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.